So several years ago, heard a Home Depot ad on, I don't know, the radio, TV, somewhere, and heard their company slogan, right? Anybody familiar with it? You can do it, we can. Okay, nobody knows it. All right, well, that died really, that did not go well. Nobody else, one person somewhere over here said it. You can do it, we can help, is Home Depot's motto, right? I'm not sure they can help all that much. If you've ever been to Home Depot, there's not that great help. But if you can find someone maybe with an orange shirt, maybe they'll be able to help you find someone else who has the right answer. You can do it, we can help. Man, we're already getting way distracted here. Let's get focused, Jason. You can do it, we can help. And I thought, you know what? That's a lot of kind of the way I think about church. That you, hopefully, you have a relationship with God that is thriving, have the Holy Spirit living in you, guiding in you, and then our job as a church is we come alongside and walk with you and encourage you, equip you, like you and the Holy Spirit living in you. You can do it, we can help. We would love to help. And as I was thinking about today's message and what we're going to talk about with these two stories that Jesus teaches us, here's what I see in today's message. If we can help you to keep moving towards God, it will make all of your life better. Here's the challenge that we often face. That when we talk about faith, church, religion, your spiritual life, too often we think of our spiritual lives or life with God as like this one little part of our life. And then we go to church on Sunday and we deal with our spiritual lives, or maybe we have a private prayer time, deal with our spiritual lives, but then we have the whole rest of our lives and we kind of move into the other area of our lives. What if our spiritual life, what if following Jesus influenced every area of our life? And then I firmly believe that if we can help you to keep moving towards God, don't stop, don't get stagnant, don't plateau in your faith, keep moving towards God, it'll make all of your life better. That if you keep moving towards God, it'll make your work life better. If you keep moving towards God, it'll make your marriage better. If you keep moving towards God, it'll even guide, God will guide you to take care of your body and make your physical health better. But you got to keep moving towards God. And so, that's what we're going to talk about today. It's we have been talking about in this last section of the Gospel of Luke. As we get closer and closer to Easter, and pretty soon we're gonna transition in like the pre-Easter season, and we're going to see that Jesus' final message, in his week right before he died on the cross for our sins, is I'm the King, and I'm going to give my life for you, because that's what good kings do. What we see in Jesus is he is the serving kind of a king. And so as he preaches and teaches, he stops and he sees someone in need and he says, "What can I do for you?" So let's start with that today. When Jesus stops and looks at you and he says, "What can I do for you today?" What do you say? Not vaguely, not in general, like for you today. I want you to consider that. That's the driving question. Of course, it's a difficult question. It's a little bit vulnerable. And there's some things inside of us, some thought patterns, some old stories, beliefs, value systems that can keep us from an honest answer when Jesus asks a question like that. And well, I think that's what Jesus gets at with these two stories that Jesus is going to tell, and we're going to look at them today. We find them in Luke chapter 8, and we're actually going to look at them in out of order. We're going to look at the second story first, and then we're going to back up and look at the first story that he tells, because I think if we understand the second story, it'll put us in a good mindset to better understand the first story. And so Jesus tells a little bit of a story here, and it's a made-up story. They're called parables, and the reason you tell a made-up story is so that you can control all of the story and that you can exaggerate some of the details so that people feel the impact of the story. So Jesus is going to tell a made-up story to get people's attention and get us thinking in the right direction. Here we go. Luke chapter 8, starting in verse 9. To some people who were confident of their own righteousness, and so they looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One of them a Pharisee, and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and he prayed, God, I thank you. He probably prayed like that too, because that's how you pray when you really want other people to hear it. So that's how you. God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all that I get. But the tax collector, he stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you, okay, story's over. Now Jesus looks him in the eye and says, I tell you, this man, the tax collector, rather than the other, the Pharisee, went home justified before God. What does that word justified mean? It means he went home right with God. The tax collector went home right with God. The Pharisee, who gave his whole life to obeying God, he did not go home right with God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Okay, go back to the story. Okay, who's the good guy, the hero in the story? The tax collector, right? And a little bit of context there, okay? Tax collectors were never the good guy. They're still not the good guy in the story, right? They never will be, right? It's just any story that has a tax collector, IRS agent, whatever that may be, in whatever time of history, they're never ever just going to be the good. That's just not the way stories are told, except for the stories of Jesus, because Jesus likes to just mess with you, right? And the Pharisees, they were super religious. They focused on believing God, being serious for God. They obeyed God. They studied the Bible. They took all the rules of God, and they wanted to obey the rules of God so much that they added extra buffer rules on top of the rules, so that just in case they accidentally disobeyed the buffer rule, at least they wouldn't obey the core of the rule. So they had rules on top of rules to keep them from disobeying the core rules. You're like, wow, that's crazy, okay. And they did it because of good intentions. They wanted to honor God. And Jesus tells a story. Tax collector, Pharisee, two guys, same place. They go to pray. And the guy who wanted and thought he was godly went home not right with God. The guy everybody thought was the sinner, who was far, 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 far from God, went home not right with God. I love this ancient painting that was painted on the wall of a church somewhere around the world, and benefit of the World Wide Web as we get to enjoy it. You see it? The tax collector on the right. Sorry, the Pharisee on the right. The tax collector on the left. And when you notice the angelic being, not really sure who that's supposed to be, because probably not Jesus, because there's wings and stuff, but whatever, the angelic being in the top, who is the angelic being facing, giving their attention to? The tax collector. So we've been thinking about okay, how do we imagine and kind of illustrate our faith and what it means to worship God, honor God, and kind of live out our faith. And well, if we were to use some of the little diagrams that we've used for the last couple of weeks, the Pharisee, he would definitely have preferred this kind of a way to view his faith, right? That there are insiders and there are outsiders, and you draw the line, and that if you're a good person, you obey the rules, and the line is like all the rules that you're supposed to obey and all the things you're supposed to do, and just kind of that's the boundary, right? And so he's like, God, I thank you that I'm in and I obey the rule, and then you've not made me like all the other people who are on the outside. This worked very, very well. It was very clear. It was very understandable, so that the Pharisee, this worked for himself, right? What's the problem? Look at his prayer, right? It's not even really a prayer when you think about it, right? They both went up to pray, two men up to pray, and the Pharisee, he prayed, God, I thank you. Okay, so that's a good way to pray. We should spend a lot of our prayers saying, God, thank you, and thanking God for things that he gives us. But it just goes off the rails after that, right? God, I thank you that wait. That I am, now he's already turned the focus away from God. He's not asking God for anything. He's not even thanking God that God has made him good or given him goodness, righteousness, anything like that. He just goes, God, thank you, and then gets completely obsessive about himself. In other words, he didn't even really need God to be there to pray this prayer. It wasn't even really a prayer. It was more like a public proclamation of how wonderful he was. Oh, God, thank you so much. I'm just so grateful, God, that I'm not like all these other losers around me. Like, the arrogance, which is the benefit of a made-up story, right? Jesus can make up the story, tell it however he wants to get the point. Interesting to note that he is looking up to heaven, but he's not looking to God. He's so obsessed with himself. He's looking only to himself. He wants everybody else to look to him. He wants all of the attention. In fact, he doesn't. Well, he would say he wants God to get the attention, but he really wants all the attention. The tax collector, on the other hand, fits the more preferable model that we think illustrates a better way to think about your faith. And that is, we just put something at the center, which we're going to propose is Jesus at the center. And really the question is not, are you in or are you out, but who are you facing and are you moving towards the center? And if Jesus is at the center, the question is not, are you in or are you out, but are you facing Jesus? And are you taking steps toward Jesus? And that is why in this story, the tax collector, who was the bad guy in every other story, is the good guy in this story, the one that we should model our lives after. He's the one who sets the good example, because even though he's looking down, he's actually facing God far more than the Pharisee. And while he's looking down, he's facing God, he's actually moving closer to God than the Pharisee, who fasts twice a week, gives a tenth of all that he has, and is super religious, super obedient. When I think about maybe the ideal, like what could be a third way, or the ideal person? Could it be possible to have the obedience of a Pharisee with the humility of a tax collector? See, the reality is, the tax collector knew that his lifestyle didn't honor God. And Jesus is not saying it's okay. Jesus is trying to point out his humility here. But the reality is, the Pharisee actually was more obedient to the way God wanted him to live. Could it be possible? And maybe what Jesus was trying to do in the lives of his disciples was to build them up to have the commitment, the devotion, and the obedience of a Pharisee, coupled with the humility of a tax collector. And so we're going to talk about humility and the practice of humility, because that's really what this story is all about. Now, when we talk about humility, we do need to be careful to avoid unhealthy humility. Because sometimes in church circles and in religious circles, we have accidentally promoted a very unhealthy kind of humility, right? An unhealthy humility goes like this. Oh God, I'm just so worthless. I can't ever get anything right. I'm just a no good, dirty, rotten sinner. I can't even imagine how you would ever love me. I'm so terrible, filthy, and rotten. I'm a worm. In fact, we actually call it worm theology, because in a couple of generations ago, that was like the way, that was the thing. I guess worms were like cultural image for badness, and so we just made the most of it. I don't know. But the example, or the thought that says, God, I'm just worthless and can't get anything right, that's actually kind of a unhealthy version of humility. And do you know why it's an unhealthy version of humility? Because at the core, it's just like pride, an obsession with yourself. See, if pride is all about, look at me, how great and wonderful I am, me, Unhealthy humility says, me, I'm terrible, I'm awful, I'm bad, I. It's still an obsession with me. Healthy humility. Let's talk about this. Healthy humility, here's what it is. Number one, healthy humility looks to God. Healthy humility is obsessed with God. Healthy humility says, God, I love to come and worship, because God, when I worship you, I sing and celebrate your goodness. That God, you are so good. God, I celebrate your faithfulness. That God, when you make a promise, you keep it. God, when you speak the truth, it is always the truth, and every word that comes out of your mouth is the truth, and I can depend on it. God, you're faithful to yourself. You're faithful to your word. God, you are so patient with me. God, and right, that's a reference to me, but it's a celebration of how patient God is, and we say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you see the difference? That is why it's so important. Okay, that's why it's important to get here when the service starts and not be like, well, it's just a warm-up. The music is just a warm-up until the preaching starts, right? Then the real thing happens. No. Like, we start at 9 a.m. when the real thing starts and the worship cranks up, because we start saying, God, you are good. God, you have blessed us. God, you. And together we get our eyes on God and we obsess over Jesus and celebrate who God is. We want to get to know the character and the personality of God because of how good and wonderful God is. Healthy humility obsesses over who God is. And then, when I obsess over how wonderful God is, I begin to notice how I don't measure up. And I begin to notice the contrast between God's absolute faithfulness and how I wish I was there, but I'm just not. And that is when humility really starts to take place. Healthy humility looks to God and obsesses over God first, then begins to self-evaluate and do some godly self-evaluation by doing it this way. Healthy humility dwells on my choices and behaviors, not labels and identities. You see, saying I'm worthless is a label and an identity that actually causes you, it will drive you to obsess about yourself. Saying, I should not have said that, focuses on a choice that I wish I would not have made, something I wish I would not have said, not a label. See, the label says, I'm a son of God. Ooh, no son of God ever should have said that. Oh, God, I'm sorry. You see the difference? Healthy humility dwells on my choices and my behaviors, not labels and identities. Therefore, if healthy humility looks to God, dwells in choices and behaviors, then healthy humility keeps me desperate for God's work in my life. Say, oh God, I want to do that a whole lot less often. God, would you come and strengthen me? God, you are a God of power, so God, would you strengthen me? God, I'm tempted to believe the lie that I'm worthless, so God, would you speak your truth to me? Healthy humility actually keeps me desperate for God's work in my life and keeps me from obsessing over myself. All right, now it is time for a little self-reflection. When you are honest, how are you doing when it comes to practicing humility? Because if you have been a church person, follower of Jesus for any amount of time, it is really easy to look around, see other people, to play the comparison game, and to start to feel good about yourself. It's so easy to become a Pharisee. In fact, maybe that's the starting point of humility today, is for you to say, oh God, the thoughts that I've allowed my mind to dwell on as I have judged and criticized and condemned other people to make myself feel better, God, I'm sorry. Oh God, would you pour out into me some of your patience that you show towards other people. Oh, God, would you give me some of that? And when Jesus says, what can I do for you? You say, God, pour out some of that mercy that you've shown to me. God, pour that into my life so I can show it to the people who drive me crazy. God, I need you. God, I'm desperate for you. End of the service. Not yet. End of the service. We're going to have prayer time. Maybe there's some folks who need to, in humility, step forward. Find one of the prayer helpers and say, oh, pray that God would pour his mercy into my soul so I treat other people like he treats me. By the way, if you're worried about other people judging you when you come forward to pray, if they do, they're just being prideful, and then God's going to use that to get their attention, convict them of their sin. So, maybe you going forward will help them recognize their pride and get right with God. So, Okay, earlier we said, if we can help you to keep moving towards God, it'll make all of life better. I would pitch to you that humility is not enough. It's one of the pieces that God really wants to work in our heart. But I think another piece that God that connects the story right before it is to keep us, because humility is hard stuff, right? This is not an easy conversation we just had. So Jesus is now like, now let me give you the encouraging story and parable that's going to keep moving you forward. We still need to kind of like do something. So here it is. Then we're going to go back up to 18 verse 1. So then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. Now I want you to notice something about that last phrase, not give up. Maybe a little better translation that some of the other translations get at is to say, and not lose heart. Because sometimes like don't give up can be like the don't give up, don't give up, don't give up kind of the coach is like, come on, you can give me 30 more push-ups, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. And it's like, oh, that's not what Jesus is trying to say here. Jesus here is like, I want to tell you a story to encourage you to keep on praying and not lose heart. Because some of you, you've been praying, and you've been praying, and you've been praying about something big in your life, and you've been asking God for a long time. And you're teetering on the edge of losing heart. I don't know why it isn't happening. I don't know why God's not answering my prayer. I don't know why, but I'm just tired of praying the same prayer over and over and over. And you're about to lose heart. And today you're going to hear from Jesus a fun little story about why you should not lose heart. And he tells you this story to help us all not lose heart. Here we go. Here's the story starting in verse 2. So he said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, grant me justice against my adversary. For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me. End of story. Pray and don't lose heart. You're like, okay. Just keep praying, wear God out. Until God's like, man, I'm just going to give Jason what he wants, so stop bothering me. Trying to take a nap up here in heaven, and Jason's down there yammering day after day after day. Please, 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 gimme, gimme, gimme. That seems like that's the application Jesus makes from the story, right? It's okay to say, yeah, this is one of the most confusing parables that people ask about. Like, what is Jesus trying to say here? Well, read on. Listen to what Jesus says. Verse 6, and the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? This is one of those parables that's not like well, it's like, do like the widow did, even though God is not like the judge in the story. God is not an unjust judge who doesn't care about justice, doesn't love people, doesn't care. God loves people, and God is the author of justice, the maintainer of perfect justice always. And yes, God is the judge of the earth, the perfect judge of all of humanity, and He loves justice, He always maintains justice, and He always loves people. So God is not the unjust judge. Therefore, prayer is not just wearing God down until He finally gives in. So why don't I get my prayers answered then? Because it's not like I've been asking for bad things. Why doesn't God answer my prayer? Do I need to remind Him? Am I not important to Him? Doesn't He care? And Jesus says, be like the widow. Move forward. Move forward. Keep asking. Keep asking. Keep asking. Keep asking. Keep asking. Don't lose heart. Because it's not like God the judge is not listening. It's not like God the judge does not care. To which we say, yes, but I just can't understand why God wouldn't answer this prayer. And whenever you're in a counseling session with somebody, and you say, I just can't understand why they would do that, you know what your counselor's going to say? The key phrase there was, I just can't understand. So let's take a little less focus on what they're doing and think about your demand for understanding. Maybe the real problem here, and I'm going to be real gentle with this, okay? But now that we're in a group counseling session, and since you said it, maybe this is about your demand to know. And maybe what's really going on here is you're struggling because you can't understand. Maybe when it comes to prayer, maybe, just maybe the timing isn't right. And that God, the good, wise judge, knows that the timing is not right to give you the answer to your prayer today. He's not going to tell you when the right timing will be, but keep asking. Keep asking, keep asking. Don't lose heart. Keep asking. The timing's just not right yet. But don't lose heart. Because when you lose heart and you stop asking, even when you get the answer you were asking for, you won't notice it, or your heart will be bitter because you stopped asking and you lost heart. And so he says, just like the sweet little widow who just kept coming back day after day, and she kept asking. Don't lose heart. Keep asking. Maybe you are not mature enough to handle what you're asking for. But as you keep asking, and you keep pursuing Jesus, and you keep facing Jesus, and you keep moving forward to Jesus, that as you keep asking and Jesus works on your heart, Jesus grows you to maturity, Jesus strengthens you, pretty soon, you'll be ready. You'll be mature, and He'll says, now you can handle it, and He'll give it to you. But just maybe you're not mature enough yet. Maybe, and this one is totally not fair, I get it, but maybe your prayer has not been answered yet because other people's freedom will be taken away. And God, in His frustratingly perfect gift of freedom, He just gets to decide when we get our freedom and when our freedom gets overridden. And for some reason, the answer that you want and that you've been asking for would involve overriding someone else's freedom, and God's just not ready to do that yet. But as you pray and as you pray and as you pray, the Holy Spirit has been convicting that other person, working on that other person's life, bringing them to a place where they voluntarily say, okay, God, I give, and then the answer comes. And so keep praying. Don't lose heart. It truly might not be you, it might be them. How about unforeseen consequences of getting what you're asking for? Maybe the prayer that you've been praying for, you realize there are some consequences that if you get it, you might not like all of the consequences that you'll get along with it. And so God says, I'm actually protecting you from a blind spot you don't even know about yet by saying no or not yet to the answer to your prayer. You've been praying and praying and praying, but don't lose heart. Keep praying. Because sometimes as we keep praying, God teaches us how to reframe and re-ask the question and ask for something better than what we have been asking for. But that comes only as you're facing God and moving towards Him. See, what prayer does is prayer keeps you facing God. Keep asking, keep praying, keep praying. Don't lose heart. Keep facing God. Keep moving forward. Keep moving towards Jesus. Or maybe sometimes, and this is the testimony I've heard from lots of prayer warriors over the years, is that sometimes the reason God has not said yes yet to the prayer we keep praying is that God is allowing us to run out of other options so that we don't take the credit. And when all other options have been exhausted, that's when He says yes. And if none of these answers sound good to you, welcome to being human. This is the frustratingly wonderful part of the wisdom and justice of God. So here's what I'd recommend. Don't try to figure out why God has not yet answered your prayer. Follow the example of the widow, Jesus says. And just keep on praying, keep on asking, keep on asking, keep on asking, and don't lose heart. God is a good judge, and He brings justice swiftly. And by the way, when He says, when Jesus returns, will He find faith? Will He find that we are faithful? You know who those who are faithful will be? Will be those who kept asking, and they never lost heart. So keep asking. Keep asking. Don't lose heart. Here's the prayer that doesn't give up, that doesn't lose heart. Number one, prayer that doesn't give up builds faith over time. The more you pray and the longer you pray, when you keep asking and you don't lose heart, in time, your faith is actually stronger because you've been praying with persistence than it was when you started praying. And if that's all you get out of it as a stronger faith, it's worth it. Prayer that doesn't give up keeps facing God, keeps facing God. Because here's what happens. When we just lose heart, we begin to look down and look away and start to drift. And one of the worst things that can happen is we become bitter and our hearts become hard. Jesus says, don't let that happen to yourself. Keep praying, keep pursuing Jesus. Prayer that doesn't give up keeps us desperate. The thing that you've been praying for, do you want it badly enough to pray for it for 20 years? Or is it only worth 2 months worth of prayer? Keep moving forward. Keep asking for what you want. And stay humble. Keep moving forward. Keep asking for what you want. Stay humble. That's what Jesus says right here. Keep moving forward. Keep asking for what you want. Stay humble. As I was thinking about this week, I was remembering probably about 20 years ago, a bunch of fellow pastors and I went away for a weekend, and we were planning some high school, middle school, high school events for a bunch of the churches on our district. And as we were sitting around sharing one morning and sharing how we could pray for each other, I said, guys, I just wish I could be more of a morning person. I'm such a night owl, but if I could be more of a morning person, I could get so much more done. I could be so much more effective. And I asked them to pray and pray and pray. And God did not answer that prayer. And seriously, for 20 years, I've been praying and praying and praying and trying and praying and trying to be the morning person. Because look, I realize the early bird gets the worm. And you know what? I don't know how or why, but I have a hunch of one of the ways that God's been working and moving, or maybe it's just getting old. But for the last several months, I find myself waking up, getting out of bed earlier than ever. That's a 20-year prayer worth praying to see the answer to. And I don't know why it took 20 years, but I'm thanking Jesus for it. keep asking. Keep asking for what you want and stay humble. The last little piece here, you got to know. You see, we read the story of the widow and, well, we just assume that she was a nice, godly woman. And when we see ourselves, we put ourselves to be like the widow, we just kind of assume like, yeah, I'm a nice person who deserves justice. What's really, really interesting, and we don't have time to kind of walk through it here, is another thing that ties these two stories together is the word justice, and to be right, and to be justified. There's a whole bunch of like theological words, but they all kind of have the same root, and that means to be right. You see, when the woman goes to the judge, she wants the judge to do the right thing and to make things right. The Pharisee goes to pray, and he is convinced that he is right with God, and he tells all of the reasons that he is right with God, but he goes home not right with God. The tax collector assumes that he's not right with God, that he is guilty before God, and in humility he repents, he asks for mercy, and he goes home right with God. And the most important experience of your life is for you to be made right with God. But it only comes as you recognize you're not nearly as good and wonderful as you think. You are so far from the nice, godly widow in the story. You and I are far more like the tax collector who is far from God. And you've got a long list of sins in which you've hurt other people and yourself and disobeyed God. And you need to be made right with God, where the judge of the earth declares you right. And that happened by the mercy of God when Jesus came. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to read the story of how he gives his life on a cross. And when Jesus dies on the cross, God, the righteous judge of the earth, maintains his own justice and gives mercy at the same exact time through the beauty of the cross. And God is both right and just in his judgment, and the one who makes us right with him through his son Jesus. And the most important act of humility that you can practice is to stand before God and say, God, I am a sinner who's disobeyed you, and I've hurt myself and other people, and God, I'm sorry. God, would you have mercy on me? Would you forgive my sins? Would you make me right? Restore my relationship with you. Turn me back towards you, oh God. I don't deserve it, but I plead your mercy. And God, who is rich in mercy, loves to give mercy and pours out his mercy on you. So, where are you today? When Jesus says, what can I do for you? How do you respond? Oh, God, make me right with you. If that's you today, that's your prayer today. Oh, God, give me the strength to keep on praying. Oh, God, I don't want to be a prideful Pharisee. I want to stop looking down on other people. God, I humble myself before you. What's your prayer today? When Jesus comes to you and says, what can I do for you today? Because I want you to keep moving forward, keep asking for what you want, and stay humble. What can I do for you today? Bow your heads with me if you would. And I want you to answer the question that Jesus asks you, what can I do for you today? Oh, Jesus, I just pray that all over this room, everybody who's watching online right now, God, I pray that we would lift up our needs to you, lift up those requests to you. God, we know what we want for you to do for us today. God, I pray that we'd ask with boldness, with confidence. Jesus, would you answer some prayers today in a big and powerful way? God, would you bring healing today in a big, powerful way, and we will give you all the credit and the glory. God, would you work and move today in a big way as we boldly respond to your invitation for what you can do.